Hello, one and all, and welcome back to College COD. Still in week one, but day two will now see the Northeast and the Southeast divisions of the CCL 2022 play their first overall matches. My whole chip with me to start off the day, Mick. And I'm not going to lie, Mick, for a time there yesterday and a couple days before, we were starting to speculate, did you cut your hair? Because you pulled it back in a way that made it look like you got like a little bit of a crop cut. And I'm glad to see the locks are flowing today. How are you feeling?
Of course, I'm feeling great, man. Knowing that my hair's still intact and all, I'm feeling like I'm on cloud nine today. But overall, I mean, I'm just excited to get down some games, some really good lineups that I've seen overall, especially kind of doing some research of the rosters, figuring out what's going on this year. I'm getting really antsy for this.
3 matches here on the main stream, while simultaneously 3 matches will also be going on our Bravo stream. You can find that at twitch.tv/collegecodbravo. It's fully studded roster worth of matchups here this evening. Kicking things off, we've got St. Clair going up against Northwood. This is a Northeastern Division A matchup in which, let's be candid here, Mick, these are 2 of the teams that are kind of looking to potentially be the #1 team in this division, courtesy call to Davenport. That's getting a lot of verbal hype around the scene, but this is a big matchup for both of these teams to kick off our first week here for the Northeastern divisions.
Yeah, I mean, most definitely. You look at St. Clair, a great roster that we saw last year, really go ahead and have themselves a really good run in, but I mean, looking at this whole, looking at the Northwood roster, things are looking a little sketchy this time around. So, I mean, that's something that we're looking forward to see how this new roster goes ahead, stacks against the likes of these teams that have been playing in the CCL, and see how they really just do in this new environment.
Yeah, the St. Clair team is a really interesting one because they were, middle of the pack largely throughout all of last year up until we got the regional qualifiers, and they stepped on the gas, ended up finishing top 24 in playoffs, including a number of really kind of key wins throughout not just the regular season, but also, most importantly, in that playoff run to get to the top 24. So let's take a look just at this St. Clair team in particular, because there are some pretty big talking points about this 4-man roster. In particular, I think both of us are very excited about Priestley. He was their leading slayer last year, and you have to feel like with Dawson gone this year, he's got to be the one to step up into that IGL role.
Oh, most definitely. And as an AR, I mean, we sat there and can go ahead and mention the AR slaying power that this team had last year. And Priestley being one of those players, being a mass influence across the map, going ahead and having a 2.0 KD in every single mode, respectively. This guy deserves some credit. And sitting in that player 1 spot, I'm assuming he's going to go ahead and take up the reins as IGL, because the way he's played the game, the way he's had such a massive influence for his squad, he needs to be the one making the calls as well, because I feel like he's had the experience, he's had the reads on every single person. He's seen them down his sight line, so he should go ahead and make those shots.
Yeah, it's interesting because Sauce was also just a really big key factor to this team before last year, but we know nothing about Brandon or Gorilla, and I think a lot of eyes are going to have to be on them here once we start to take a look at Northwood's roster, because we know plenty about the 4-man team that make up the Timberwolves from Northwood. A lot of people looking at this roster saying, well, this is just not fair in certain regards, because you've got some people that had played for Ottawa last year. I think with the new news coming through that there's going to be no room for 2 teams on the same school to be in the same main division. You have to be either in the main or an academy. You've got Radio and Fame who now find themselves a part of Northwood, and they've, well, made a lot of very key upgrades to the program at large, bringing in also Infinite and Bink to this team.
I mean, upgrades, I feel like would be somewhat of an understatement. I mean, these guys have just revamped overall. I mean, looking at the way they had themselves a new roster, as we mentioned, a lot of Challengers players, a lot of Ottawa players. That's a big problem because, I mean, I think the reason their name went to Northwood is because the games are going to go south for every single other team that's up against them. I mean, everything really just stacking up for their side is just looking super, super solid. And even, I don't know how much we really have to go into these guys. I mean, we can bring stats from other leagues and really just talk about them overall. But, I mean, honestly, I think they're just going to show us what they're made of tonight.
Absolutely the case. And even before this roster was confirmed to be what was going to be happening, this Northwood school actually did put together a really solid season last year without all of this radiant fame that you've got kind of built into this 4-man roster. They finished top 64, made a run again through that regional qualifiers. So really successful season, I think, in large part to what they did last year. But the sky literally is the limit here for this team going into the season. I think a lot of people have these guys as in the top 3 in some formation, depending on who you ask about the top 25 in CCL during the preseason, and rightfully so. I mean, these 4 players are routinely, at worst, finishing top 64 in Challengers North America. At best, you see them on Sunday make quite a run. So I don't know. It's hard to find vacancies or vulnerabilities. The only thing we really have to go off of, though, kind of comparing these schools, they did play last year against one another for what it's worth. St. Clair able to get through a Game 5 and then eventually take the best of Northwood, but this year is going to look very different compared to last year for sure.
Yeah, it most definitely is. I think it all comes down to really how the team plays this out, whether or not they want to get themselves on the right maps. And I mean, obviously, us knowing the map set, how everything's going to pan out. I mean, we said it earlier, St. Clair needs to look to go ahead and play into those ARs. They got to go ahead and look for these long lines of sight, find themselves an advantage where they can work it out, and also use that expertise themselves. Sure, this whole Northwood roster, they know how to go ahead and play against the top dogs, but that may go ahead and make them sleep on these little people that are around under the radar, kind of just flying and laying low, and see how they can go ahead and stack up. Because honestly, St. Clair has so much more to be working off of, knowing that these players are going to have so much more VODs on their hands. They're going to have so much more resources available to them, and they got to see them Sunday. And even then, any other challenger's position over the course of the summer.
That's very fair. And here's the thing. You look at what St. Clair was good at last year, and where I think their giant postseason run started to build some momentum, largely actually resulted in their search and destroy. And I think if you put out kind of a keys to victory for St. Clair is you got to be proficient there, because who knows what kind of scrimmage or rehearsal reps this Northwood team has gotten in search and destroy in particular. And then on top of that, you have to keep them at range a little bit. You mentioned the AR presence for St. Clair last year was a huge talking point as we got into the postseason. You have to kind of feel like if you're going to beat Northwood tonight, you need to keep the SMG slaying presence that you're going to expect from Northwood at bay. Get into a position to where you can hold them at least responsible on certain rotations, because the minute that you misstep or play a little bit too slowly, Northwood will have the individual prowess to completely decimate your squad from the back.
Yeah, and I think that makes a really good follow-up point to just the entirety of this game. The way the pace has changed up, the way the Vanguard feels a lot faster, that's going to be your biggest problem is those SMGs, because this game has opened up so much more potential for them, saying, you know what? You find yourself in a lot of scenarios, the AK-74U being the choice of weapon last year when it comes around to SMGs, it's because it had a lot more range. The MP40 doesn't really have that kind of kick to it. It doesn't have that advantage that you really see the AK-74U, where you have that recoil that's so controllable. You need to get in their face, and they're going to say, well, let's just make you 10 times faster, and you can do that exactly. Yeah. That's a big thing they're going to have to go ahead and look out for. They're going to have to make sure their SMGs are really just there to play as a counterplay, keep them contested, and don't even worry about those traits. Don't play it slow. Keep yourself in the middle of the map. Keep yourself open, wide out in those areas, and make sure your ARs can play off of you.
All right, well, let's take a look at our map set here as we're getting ready to go for map number 1 to see what venues we'll have in play for us. And again, it's just one of those that these two teams very well will likely find themselves in the conversation for top 25, but I think for St. Clair, you got to come out the gate hot and really prove a point, and you're going to have to do that on Berlin Hardpoint. I heard your kind of emotional interjection there. What's your thought process on this first map?
I mean, Berlin, it's a great start for them overall. I feel like when it comes right to the hard point, they're going to have themselves a really good time, and I feel like that AR Slayers are really going to excel in a map like this. When you have so many lines of sight, you have so many breakable windows, so many breakable walls, the entire map feels wide open. So long as you can just get in their head, play yourself through multiple avenues, multiple viewpoints, and sit there and just kind of keep them on their toes, I mean, we're going to see Northwood be fairly confused overall, regardless of how they've seen themselves stand overall in challengers. But when it comes around to Bokage, you said Search and Destroy is looking good for St. Clair. I'm hoping it's looking outstanding in that case, because we sit there and say that the A site a lot of times is the main hit. We saw a lot of teams just go ahead and rush it up. B is that more longer sight. So they're going to have to take advantage of that and say, look, let's go somewhere they're not really used to sitting at and create a little bit of a curveball on their way to go ahead and stand up against.
So really, I think, if we were to take everything that we've said so far and wrap it up into kind of what we're looking forward to, favorite right here is for sure Northwood. However, if you're St. Clair, you have to be well prepared if you're gonna have a chance against this Northwood team. It's going to be a top tier matchup. That's still not off the table. But just when it comes to individual mechanical skill, I think everyone who's watching says Northwood should win this matchup. In your mind, is it literally a preparation thing? Does St. Clair just have to be over prepared compared to what Northwood's going to bring to the table? Did they have a chance?
I think quite honestly, it just comes down to adaptability. I mean, they can prepare all day, but you're going to see a different team every single matchup that comes around. So they're going to have to go ahead and be ready to go ahead and make those adaptations mid-match. Sit there, take a second. When it comes around to hard point, don't just keep on rushing in. Don't get over antsy and say, look, they're a little bit ahead of us. Let's go ahead and get scared and try and go ahead and buff this out because they're going to run away with the game. That's how you let them run away with the game. You go ahead, get a little bit too far ahead of yourself because their slaying power is going to be that much better. You got to go ahead, settle down, just calm yourself a little bit and say, what can we do here? How can we set this up? Let's look at the next site that's going to come around, because sure, there's money hills in the game, and if they get those, that's a problem. But we have the potential to turn anything into a pro for us.
So really, I think the best way we could talk about this is work smarter, not harder. If you're St. Clair, as best as you humanly can. I think that's kind of the big key because it's difficult. It was last year, for Radial and Fame when they were on Ottawa, for anyone to even come close to touching them. Now you add in Infinite and Bink, who, again, are also very talented Challengers players with a wide history in their careers across a number of different Call of Duty titles. But we'll load on in. Map number 1, Berlin. Got to see what the off-the-break setup is going to look like for St. Clair. If you can come out and really stick it to Northwood, get even trades, that would be, I think, a good start for you. The biggest thing about it, this map, is I think just the overall awareness, too. St. Clair needs to be very aware of what the timings are looking like as you start to rotate from hill to hill, because this is a wide map, and Northwood being able to sneak through is definitely potentially on the cards. So we jump on in. Hill number 1, it's Northwood, who find themselves in a pretty solid setup around the courtyard, but actually, pardon me, it looks like the names are a bit backwards here. St. Clair will be the team that actually gets in first.
Yeah, that's a great little start for them because we sat there and mentioned their ARs are going to go ahead and slay out. They're going to do their job, but you got to make sure get some time in these smaller sites. And a lot of them are going to be those close quarter oriented sites where you're indoors, you're going ahead, getting right and frisky, right there in the fray. And we can already see that being incentivized for both sides of the field. But St. Clair having a little bit more control of the field, which is looking really good for them.
Yeah, looking really solid on this contest from the front. Problem is they're not actually able to accrue too much time. 12 seconds left, and you can already see the spawns that are on the north side of the minimap for Northwood will mean that they are on rotation. Bink trying to hold this responsibly from the top third level in the middle of the map will at least get a scout out as far as where the teams are coming from, but St. Clair actually find 3 straight kills. Now it's just Infinite. Last player left alive for Northwood inside the hard point. And, well, that's not necessarily going to be what you want. He's not able to get away. And with that, Northwood actually get bounced. And this is a heck of a start for St. Clair.
Oh, it's a massive start for them. It's definitely a good run for them to go ahead and know they had the rotations, had themselves a pretty solid start when it came around to that first hill. I mean, knowing that that's going to be SMG acceleration. And even then, that's the same thing here. You carry on that momentum, find yourself indoors, go from one building to the next, and just carry that momentum, that force along with you. But as it stands right now, we're going to see a pretty big switch up when it goes to 2 to 3. You're going to find yourself going outdoors. You're going to find yourself a massive sightline to go ahead and cut off. And that may be where Northwood could go ahead and put them into their hands.
Yeah, this has been good, though, we talk about some of our main focused players. Sauce, 5-2. It was 5-1 until he just previously had fallen. Really solid for St. Clair to get this early advantage. Now as you rotate over to 3, Bink is by himself. There is no tradable position here, and he's not able to capitalize on the first kill. Second one comes his way. Still not enough damage done. The pistol's out, but it's only good for a single kill. So now scrambling to get back over towards the hard point is Northwood, and the kills turn up in favor of St. Clair. This has been a pretty solid attempt from the front thus far, but the spawns are still decent for Northwood to hold on to the back.
And even then, I think it all came down to the rotation. We saw that Northwood really wasn't too prepared for it. They already found themselves getting caught out there towards the edge, as you saw. I mean, the rest of the team not really being there for trades, obviously setting up for the site, which is kind of working for them there in the front end. But now we see St. Clair really starting to bite back, playing a lot more collectively, a lot more together, and you can tell that they're just trying to work off of each other. And it's really panning out for a good game so far. Northwood finding themselves a lot of scrap time, able to go ahead and get themselves some spots here and there, but overall, we're not seeing the consistency we need. And partially that may be out of Infinite right now. Going 2-6, I'm expecting a little bit more out of him as he goes ahead and gets the fires in his eyes.
Yeah, and that's the big key is you expect a lot from all 4 of these players for Northwood.
Yeah.
So a slow start will be one that I think anybody at any time will look at and say, what the heck's going on here? Nice kills from Priestley mid-map. Survives with a single point of health. And with that elimination, it's St. Clair all over this new hard point. And you also got Sauce, who's actually kind of watching this rotation mid-map. He's 6 in white. And this is going to be great news. You're going to know exactly where this hit is coming from. It just comes down to, can you actually confirm the kills? Now Sauce moving forward right through mid-map. He's right behind on the pinch. Good for 1, but not a second. And Northwood, they've gone 1 for 1 with a chance to contest from the front.
You got to think about these setups right now. I mean, sure, you're grabbing yourself some kills, but you got to go ahead and move on the site. And this is the money hill. I mean, right here in Train Yard, you're right there. You're set up for some really good spawns, which we already see St. Clair going ahead and getting. And you can get those free rotations, those quick little moves onto the site. But if you're getting slayed out, that's where Northwood's going ahead and turning things into high gear, saying, look, we have the slay ability now. We can go ahead and find ourselves a kill. Another one, follow through. And even if they're going ahead and respawning, there's still a delay between each respawn. And we can find ourselves on that site fairly quickly, even then finding themselves a couple extra seconds here on the rear end.
Speaking of, in the scrap time, Infinite on 5 in a row. That'll be good for the glide bomb. Not going to secure the 6th for the strafing run. But with that, Northwood will likely be able to get this scrap time and rely on Bink to watch this rotation into the 5th hill. Good kills coming out 3 in a row here for Northwood. They will open up the 5th point favorably as the lead now starts to grow. And you have to make a decision here if you're St. Clair. How do you want to try to contest this? Because you do not have any of the 3rd floors on either side of this hard point. So you've got to find kills, and the gunfights you would figure will not be very easy. Apparently the kill feed will reinforce that point as it goes another 4-man feed for the side of Northwood.
You said it's exactly those third floor advantages, those high grounds to be working off of, because we know how the high ground works. It usually gives you the advantage, so you want to be playing into it as much as possible. And St. Clair, with those great ARs, they got to be setting up for that, and we just don't see it there yet. If anything, they should have given up train yards sooner to find themselves on this hill, because, I mean, P5 is really contested. It's right there in the middle of the map, but they could have found themselves counting every single second on it so long as they had the right setup.
And now with the scrap time finally being the moment where St. Clair can break, the next question to be asked is, can you actually rotate over to maybe contest the backside favorable spawns for the first hard point? Decent attempt from Brandon, but that gets shut down, so now the hit for St. Clair is going to rely on Gorilla and, and Gucci Gang Sauce to come around the back, and they'll go 1 for 1. What does that do for the spawns? Well, it's not going to do anything because Fame quickly comes back to find the trade, and with that, status remains the same as it was here for the side of Northwood as they're in the hill and they have the spawns.
Yeah, they have a great station right now. They have a great positioning overall on the map to go ahead and get this P1, but, I mean, that's a great setup for them. No, P2's pretty easy for rotation. We saw it earlier out of the likes of St. Clair to go ahead and get themselves a little bit more of a lead. They're really slacking on it right now because earlier we saw that St. Clair was really just doing a good job overall in the slaying department, or at least good enough to keep themselves relevant in this game. Somewhat to have a little bit of a lead, but not enough to really run away with. But this is where the game's really starting to get out of their control. They're now down 70 points. They got to go ahead and step things up because you see that every single member of Northwood, even Infinite, who we saw earlier, was going 2-9, now 10-11. That's a big problem.
Especially considering that he's one of the main focuses of the objective. Almost a minute worth of hardpoint time, although 2 other members will join him in that conversation. Fame and Radial over 60 seconds, no problem. And this is one of those games that you look at and say it was close until it wasn't, because it was a solid start for St. Clair, but really since that 4th hardpoint, as you had mentioned at the train yard, it just felt like there was no room to work with and no room really gained. Although now, Brandon may be changing the narrative single-handedly, works into the hill for a double. He's on 3 in a row, also in a good position up top to help out his home raise down low, and that's going to be enough for good favorable trades. Need to win this scrap of 30 seconds, though. And as Fame takes the challenge, he wins the crucial 1v1, forcing St. Clair to have to scramble, and as they do, Fame, ready to pick him apart, gets himself a 3rd kill, and the number is good for Northwood for at least a time.
This is going to be a point I mentioned a lot over the course of the series. Working smarter, not harder, because it's what we really mentioned as our keys to victory. And so far, we're not seeing those collective pushes out of the likes of St. Clair. You go ahead, you look at the mini-map, they find themselves funneling onto a site, finding a trade. That's great and all, but you got to consider, I mean, Northwood have much better spawns. They've been set up for the site. They know really where to allocate themselves and how to make themselves have an advantage for a site to make their jobs that much easier. And you can't let that happen. If you got to have a player going for the rear, you got to go ahead and have a collective really move onto that site, or go ahead and have somebody go ahead and be that wild card. And we just haven't seen any of those crazy plays while still having some sort of synergy.
And, you know, the thing was, Sauce started off so hot in the first 3 hard points. He's more than cooled, 12 and 21. It's just not going to be good enough. And that's the thing, is you've got on the other side some all-star players that are going to have some major considerations for challengers this year. Fame and Radial in particular are 2 that I'm mostly excited for, and they're both nearly double positive. That's kind of the problem that we lined up at the top of this broadcast, was St. Clair had to find a way to quell all of the individual pressure that Northwood could just establish by just running at you. And off the break, things were solid, but as you had mentioned, the rotational game for Northwood has just been far superior than from St. Clair.
I mean, because I'm sure looking at Sauce and looking at Brandon, who had themselves a great start, I mean, at this stage in the game, they're just running in. They're expecting the same results. They're just kind of getting in their head saying, look, I was slaying earlier. I can still do it. Well, look, that's where adjustments come into play. I mean, it's not impossible for somebody to make adjustments. I mean, people can really just have a completely pace of game just in a blink of an eye. And next thing you know, you're blinking, the game's over, and you find yourself saying, what happened? And that's really where you got to go back through this later and figure out what exactly happened.
It's tough, man. You know, one of the players that we were, I think, most excited for last year at St. Clair in slaying, obviously no longer part of the team. I had to figure that he probably graduated. You know, that was your, you know, alongside Priestley, they were kind of like the lightning and thunder of that St. Clair roster and why that playoff run happened in the first place. Without him now, you look at Sauce to try to step up into that role, and you have to kind of question what is exactly going to be the case with the IGLing. Not only to mention the fact that you've got 2 players that we don't really know much about that you have to hope can put on similar kinds of performances as a player like Slaying, and a lot of our opening keys to victory for St. Clair ended up turning up pretty darn absent overall in that first map.
Yeah, and honestly, I feel like that's not too bad of a start. I mean, knowing that you can get yourself a couple points on the board, not really being too shy of the 100 points, I mean, that's not the great standing overall, but I mean, when you're noticing that search and destroy, this is your next map, this is your next mode, you can go ahead and change the game a little bit. You can go ahead and slow down. You can let your mind start to really get those gears working. But as it sits right now, you still got to go back in the stat line, look back on this last map and figure out what exactly went wrong, where things went south, and where they went so wrong so quickly.
Yeah, and I think you kind of look first and foremost at the fact that you've got Radial who goes 31 and 15. 24 of those kills are non-traded. And that's just one of those things we talk about, the ability for any of these individuals on the Northwood team to just pop off and just run rampant. You can't let that happen. And at a certain moment there in that second rotation, you had called it out that, hey, these hits from St. Clair are not guided at all from a full four-man team perspective. It's one hit here, one hit there. We're not really setting anything up. And when you don't have those setups on break attempts, you're not going to find trades. And that seems to be largely the case throughout a lot of the statistics that you see there. So not the greatest start for St. Clair, but as you had alluded to just before we saw the stat screen, Search and Destroy has to be where they extend this series. It's difficult because we're not having a control here, and they weren't a bad control by a team by any means last year, but without that being there, you have to steal a respawn somewhere for Northwood. And that's going to be a tough ask, I think, considering that the other two hard points we have are both Tuscan and Bacage. But it starts here in map number 2. You've got to come out with good, solid game planning here for the Search and Destroy and Bacage for map 2.
You most definitely do. And you got to make sure your SMGs that they're going ahead and having a mental reset, saying, look, don't beat yourself up, buddy. These are some real Titans that we're up against right now. You can't go ahead and let them really get in your head like that, because looking at how we saw the hard point, it's going to almost translate to some extent. We saw 1.63 average kills out of the two SMG players that had the most hill time out of the likes of St. Clair.
Yeah.
That's a problem, because that's only going to be really translating over to one player when you come around to defending that bomb site. And that's a theoretical, even if you get to the site. So you can't really be rushing too much. You can't get over antsy. You got to make sure to have those post-plant setups when you're on that offense. And honestly, I feel like B should be the hit for him. Work into those long line of sights. Find yourself somewhat of a weird angle to be playing off of that Northwood's not going to see coming, because we see a lot of these professional players. We see a lot of these high-tier players going right for A and just playing the aggression game.
So you're saying stay away from the mixiness of Granny's house and get over to the river, where maybe trades could be a little bit easier to find. Okay, I could definitely see that potentially being the case. I'm really curious, I think, defensively, will they have an answer for what Northwood's going to bring, which you have to feel is going to be speed and aggression? It just, there's no reason for them not to. I think the start of that game, we were all kind of like, okay, hold on a second. St. Clair is putting on a fight. But I think eventually Northwood's like, wait a second, we're just better. Let's just be better. And that mentality could lead to some really full four-man hits, essentially, in theory, when Northwood's on offense. So I'm curious, because I think you've got, at least something that St. Clair could work with. Try to work around that B site, try to find some more open framed trades where you can guarantee yourself at least a second look at a gunfight, whereas you let Fame run around inside of Granny's house, you could be chasing him for what feels like a year.
Yeah, even then, I mean, you know the old saying, the old song, over the river and through the woods to Grandma's house we go. You got to go ahead and start yourself on that B side of the map. Go ahead and make sure to settle down just in case something crazy does happen. And just play for those retakes, because Northwood, knowing their aggression, knowing their SMG players, you got to find some kind of alternative avenue. I mean, go ahead, find yourself towards that rear side of the map. Go to the attacking spawns and then work from there. Work from the back. That's something we don't see a lot, because these players are all used to ego challenge. They want to see somebody. They want to see face-to-face. They have some kind of samurai code that we don't know about. But you got to go ahead and challenge that. You got to get right behind their backs, play a different game, and then go ahead and get in their heads with it.
All right. I like it. We'll see what the chess game looks like from St. Clair, because that's the biggest thing. They're going to have to just be mentally stronger here than this Northwood team if they want to have a chance. And I know we're kind of out there fishing to see what the win conditions could look like for St. Clair, but it really just comes down to the end of the day. This Northwood team, a lot of people have as a top 3, like we mentioned at the top of the broadcast, for the CCL period, let alone this division, which they should cruise their way into the second stage at the top, if not, number 2 in this division. I think it'd be a surprise and an upset if they did finish number 2 in that division, simply because the team that is most likely to contest them probably is the one that's on screen here, unless Davenport does have something to offer that we just don't know about yet. So I'd be excited to see what they have to offer in the future. But Bacage, map number 2 for the Search and Destroy, should be ready to go here in just a moment for you. Again, the Bravo channel has also kicked off, so make sure you head on over if you're looking for multiple perspectives. I know Michigan State's coming up in the second slot. Those are 2 brand new schools to the CCL with a lot of rivalry built into it, so that's a hell of a way to say welcome to the CCL style would you like to play your bitter rivals very first time out? Seems that that's going to be a really fun one for you guys. So a lot of really solid action coming across. I know coming up next, we've got Concord Penn State. That one's going to be another very highly anticipated matchup with two top-tier squads that very well could find themselves as Northwood, potentially a top 3 school this year. All right, Mick, thanks. So that was a throw to you.
I'm sorry. I'm just a little flabbergasted. You said all those names, all those teams. I know Michigan, Michigan State, and then also Penn State and Concord. I mean, all those lineups. I mean, if anything, it warrants extra tabs. I mean, even for me, who's on a broadcast for one, I still want to sit there and watch the other. So I'm gonna have to go back later and listen to it. But I mean, just sitting there listening to those lineups, knowing everything that's going to pan out tonight, it's obviously just kind of what you're trying to really advocate for. You need to stick around for all this because there's so much contention just overall in the CCL right now that you can't miss a single second of it.
I agree, but we will take just a small break because we're having some trouble with lobbies. Maybe not. Maybe we're actually ready to go hearing, so never mind. We'll hopefully be good to go as we're loading on in here. Small delay, but we're ready to go here for Bacage, Search, and Destroy. And, well, the biggest thing, if you were kind of glazed over by all the words we just said, St. Clair's got to come with some variety, flexibility, and just generally some newness, if you want to call it that, because that's the only way you beat this Northwood team is taking them by surprise.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, that's all it comes down to. So going ahead, finding something, because we say it time in, time out. I mean, the best swordsman always may not fear the second swordsman, but he does fear the idiot with the sword. So, I mean, you got to go ahead. You got to pull something out crazy that you don't really find coming around too much. And even then, some trades right off the rip. Going to be great for both sides.
Wow, okay. Northwood just says, we're not even going to play defense. We're just going to run at you. And those are the mistakes that you have to punish Northwood for. And so far, St. Clair have done that. Although Bink, who's looking to navigate a 1v3, has opened up with a first kill. So now it's just a 1v2. Bomb going to be planted at A. And Bink playing around the backside of Water Wheel just wants to make sure that his long flank stays open. But St. Clair are happy just to bunker up quite literally, play for trades on the zone itself, and that will work out nicely. Good team fire coming through, and St. Clair strike first.
That's a great way to open things up, honestly. I don't want to say it's a repeat of Hardpoint by any means necessary, but Search and Destroy is a little bit slower, and this is a great way for them to go ahead and answer. As you said, the aggression on that defense, for them to go ahead and switch things up and say, look, we're going to go ahead. Sure, we go ahead and have a little bit of a bad start, but we can go ahead and bite back. We can have that answer. We can make things look doable, and just go ahead and doing that in one round can speak a lot of volume when you're looking at these next couple, especially when you now have, the bomb to go into the next time around.
Okay. Tempo pace came out pretty extreme for Northwood. 3-man hit now starting to build over towards that A site that you alluded to would likely be the common location for a lot of these pushes. Nades will push Sauce back from the top window. And that will mean that now you've all of a sudden got to work your way through the first floor, as the second floor has been denied as far as an angle is concerned. Smoke comes through. Sauce wants to get involved, but as he does, Infinite will tally up the first blood.
And even then, that was a 1v4 scenario. You got to go ahead and wait for those picks, because you even see right there, Priestley able to go ahead and grab one, play it slow and steady. These Northwood players, they can go ahead and see where they are in that smoke. They can play off of each other. You don't have that leisure. You don't have that luxury. You got to go ahead and work with the rest of your team, play off that trade, because now you put them in a sticky situation.
Oh, wow. Okay, a little bounce pass from Brandon actually confirms a kill onto Infinite. It's a heck of a nade. Priestley now working through the middle of the map, but Fame has denied. This is a 1v3 opportunity for Fame with a bomb planted. 23 seconds on the clock. Fame around the corner. Goes to the hipfire, finds the kill. He's 1v4'd in this map before. Does he have a 1v3 in him? Sword out. Brandon from the backside, able to find a couple of shots, but no kill. Now over the top, Brandon gets the pistol out, wins the gunfight. 5-1 start for the kid, plus the defuse. It's Sates 2-0 up.
And I mentioned that samurai code earlier, but I didn't think Fame was going to take it that seriously. Whipping out the sword and all. He was ready to go ahead and get right in your face. But honestly, St. Clair pulling out a great round overall to get themselves to a 2-0. So, I mean, this is looking a lot better for them. Now setting that, look, they can win both sides of the field. That's a great statement to make against the likes of Northwood. Because I'm sure right now they're thinking, what's going on? How we sit there and win a lot of these frags up front, and then we can't end up trading it? Well, you're playing a little bit too close to the bomb, buddy. You're rotating around. You're not looking for the bigger scheme of things. You're not looking at the bigger picture. And honestly, that's what St. Clair's going to go ahead and collapse on you if you don't go ahead and keep your eyes on that.
What's the play here for Northwood? It was an aggressive defensive setup the first time around. This time, respect has been given. The line drawn in the sand, but first blood still goes the way of Gorilla. That's on the outer side by River, which you very acclimatedly had called out. Maybe looking for some pressure over towards B. Radial has to sit and lean towards the B side here, playing through mid-gate. Infinite, who gets tagged, has to back off, and that's a wide open and completely vacant A side if St. Clair wants it.
It most definitely is. They just got to go ahead and manipulate that. You got to have Sauce right here, grab that frag, and he does go ahead and end up getting it. So that still gives you numbers advantage. You had the bomb in hand still. You got to go ahead and get down on the side. Play it long, play it slow and steady, and make sure you can get the right trades when it comes down to it. And there it is. Go ahead, just keep your life alive. Let a teammate come in, give you the assist, because we don't all need the Valor here. We just got to get ourselves around, and that's exactly what St. Clair's doing.
Is this a bit too overconfident from Northwood in your mind? Because for me,
yeah,
this is the loosest I've seen these teams play, or these players rather play in Search and Destroy in a long time.
Trust me, I mean, I'm just as shocked as you are. I saw Purdue lose last night. I mean, there is a lot of shockers that I've seen thrown at me so far, and this is definitely one of them. Seeing Northwood just kind of get over antsy, just go ahead, rush into a site, and they think they're better in slaying, which I'll give them credit for it. They are. But just because Vanguard's a little bit faster, that doesn't mean you can go ahead and just rush a site all willy-nilly. You still have to coordinate something because you only have one life to play off of per round.
Well, this time, the coordination for Northwood's offense will see a plant at B. Setup for the post plant is also in a really solid position. You got Bink deep, but Gorilla actually sees this. The tags are good enough to at least reposition Bink, and that opens up space and maybe even get in from the front.
Oh.
Brandon for one onto Chris Radio for the trade. Fame looking to lock down Priestley, and as he does, and now goes to a 3v2. Retake still, though, on the way. Brandon down low, finds one. Tallies the second on the Infinite. Now it's just down to Fame. 1v2. 20 seconds on the clock. And Brandon's going to hop for the defuse. Fame surely has heard that. Does he have the help, though? Yes, he does. And St. Clair still flawless as they go up 4-0, and Brandon has earned himself a glide bomb.
There it is. Putting that pressure on these guys time in and time out. Make sure, even if you're on the defensive end, they're eventually going to have to move off that bomb. They're going to go ahead, see that you grabbed those shots. It was Gorilla right there in the front end. Grabbing those shots, forcing you off of the river a little bit more, putting you to the middle of the map and saying, all right, now this bomb is looking a lot more open. Do that time in, time out, and if we grab a frag, that's a lot better. Find yourself in a 2v1. Fame once again being the last player standing, and that's a consistency we really can't ignore. This man, I think, needs to get a little bit more gunfights, because sure, he's capable of clutches, but we haven't seen it come out yet, so he needs to obviously change something up.
And this is a huge advantage for St. Clair. I mean, John Madden comment, they're up 4-0, but they've got a glide bomb to kind of bail them out. I would love to see them do something that would border on the word stupid. Just try to catch Northwood off guard. Do something weird. You've got a lot of rounds to play with here, and now that Northwood, they quite literally have their backs up against the wall, you have to think that they're going to play a little bit more standard. Sauce. Infinite's right on the inside. First blood. Opposite side of the map over towards B, though. We'll see Bink tally, and that'll be enough for 4v3 for Northwood's defense. But St. Clair, they look like they do want to still hit over towards the safe side, and there's only one player here defending.
I mean, sure, that's a great setup for him, and this is a great scenario, but overall, I mean, you mentioned that glide bomb. Play into it. Don't be afraid for that. Find yourself a free round. B is going to be the open bomb, to where you can actually get a kill off that glide bomb. Otherwise, you're indoors. You're not really having too much security. You're not really reinforced too much. And even then, that's just for the side of Northwood. They have so much to be working off of, so much cover, and this fake smoke may be exactly what they need, but it's not going to be as fake as you think. Instead, you're going to see Northwood running right in, just clearing house and finding their first round onto the board.
That's so unfortunate. Nade was getting cooked, and there was no chance to throw it, while Infinite just ran right through the smoke, and then Bink eventually comes around the back to make sure the flank is still a part of the retake. So first round for Northwood, but a lot to do here. And for St. Clair, again, I still live off the moniker. Why not try something weird? Do something completely uncharacteristic for this map, just because you've got some rounds to play with, and maybe that'll tilt your numbers advantage early into your favor again.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, all I saw in that round was them just trying to go ahead and ego challenge these Northwood players, saying, look, they're a little bit lackluster to this game. Let's go ahead and just actually get in their face. Surely we're in their heads. Well, even if you're in their heads, their fingers are still doing all the work, and those definitely aren't going to be falling asleep anytime soon. So you'll give them that opportunity to really go off, for them to go ahead and get those gears running, and something like that, a first frag is going to be great for them in this one.
That's a key position for Priestley to hold on to as well. Shots were coming into him, but didn't make a difference. Sauce bursts open the doors. Help is here. Bink close. Oh, they see him. Nade goes out. There's the pre-fire shot. Infinite has nowhere to go. Now it's just one more player in, but the team nade comes out. Doesn't make too much of a difference. Brandon hits the opposite side, and that'll be good for the kill. Now he hops onto the defuse. Fame through the smoke. Comes out. Tries to spam it down, but Sauce very avidly watching over the top of his homie will make sure St. Clair secure the round, and they go up 5-1.
I love it, man. Double ups. That's what you got to do. Go ahead, keep the numbers game alive, and be playing off of it. And that's what we've seen the past two defensive rounds when they go for that defense. Make sure to be playing off of those numbers. Get a man on the bomb, get the pressure there. Go ahead and bait out that last player, and then find yourself the cover to go ahead and win out that round. Because even if you go ahead and do it quick enough, I mean, we saw there was still about 15 seconds there on the clock. Sure, you got 8 more seconds to still make a play, but I mean, you don't want to go ahead and let that time linger. That player's going to be forced into shoes, and I mean, that clock is only going to go down to 7 seconds for the attacking side to make an answer. So a great way for St. Clair to go ahead and put themselves in the match point. This is looking like a much better series by the minute.
Bink, the lone defender towards B. Already used both of his nades. Has dead silence to work with if he needs to maneuver quickly. And he will actually kind of change his position to keep his riverside wide open and mostly watch over the middle of the map. Timing was not there. 60 seconds still on the clock. St. Clair setting up for what looks to be an A hit again. Still have that glide bomb if they want it, but Gorilla first blood onto Bink. That might be the call to rotate back over to B if I'm St. Clair, but looks like they're still going to be avidly looking towards A.
Even then, I think they're just doing it all willy-nilly, as you said, just kind of doing a weird play, going ahead, getting some peeks, getting themselves into the fray, looking for some kind of sight lines and looking for wherever the players are. But honestly, if you're Sauce here, you have the bomb and you're on A. What are you doing? The rest of your team is stationed around you, but they don't have a move to be making off of you just yet. You're giving so much leeway for these defenders to go ahead and get a quick little defuse to get off on the field, but we don't see that coming out just yet. Knowing that you don't have numbers advantage, this is looking a lot sketchier by the second.
Priestley trying to get around the back. Fame keeps honest the flank, and then the desperate play through smoke. Not going to amount to much. And yeah, you know, look, we're being nitpicky for sure, but hey, St. Clair, you get first blood outside river, you got a glide bomb to work with. It seems like it's pretty much clear cut. Why not just rotate back through barn and go over to B and use that glide bomb to make sure no one's sitting top tower?
Yeah, and honestly, I don't think they're really too concerned because right now what they're probably saying in their headsets is that we've won defense every single time. So we're not really too stressed about this just yet. But, I mean, honestly, we're going to see Northwood, as I said, don't let them go ahead and get more kindle for that fire. When they find themselves another round, you're just giving them more time to breathe. And honestly, these beasts are eventually going ahead and going to bite back. And that's a big problem to consider, knowing that how well they just stomped you into the ground when it came around to hard point. You can't let that Slayer come out.
Another great set nade from Brandon, bought the kills, favoring Northwood. 3v2 situation, but Brandon, free kill onto Fame.
Oh!
And now it's down to Bink and Radial. And Radial's gotten around the back. He's actually going to open up a lot of space here. Brandon on his lonesome, 1v2. He's going to rotate all the way back through Barn, and I love the idea of this. The problem is he's just got an MP40, so you have to be very cautious about what angles you actually want to take as you start to re-aggress upon this bomb site. You've got Bink holding close, Radial watching the long flank, and Brandon will, actually try to go through tunnel.
No.
I think we're thinking the same thing here, Bink. This is a death sentence, and Bink has already scouted it out, and now there's no choice. You have to commit through this. Bink throwing shoulders. Help will be there from Radial. Shots will tag, and this is just playing with your food at its finest.
Even then, you still got to make a push to the bomb. Sure, you find both those frags, but will you have enough time? You got to make the push right now. You got to win that gunfight. It never really comes out into fruition. I mean, we even sat there and said it earlier. You got to find some weird plays. Sometimes Northwood, they're going to step up, and now they're saying, look, we got to do some weird plays, and it's working out for them. Go ahead, get yourself stationed to the back of the map, find yourself in the spawn of the opposing side, and just give them a play they're not really expecting. And as we said, the MP40, you're not really going to find yourself accelerating in those long-range combats. You find a stationed assault rifle, you want to go ahead and find a way either A, to go ahead and kill somebody and make a move onto that site quick enough, or B, look for that hybrid. Find that assault rifle to pick up. And where are they going to be? In the top, covering that bomb. I mean, going ahead, pretending to go ahead and defend that flare, have a second sight line where they can go ahead and trade off with each other. And if you go ahead and kill that Oracle, your job becomes a lot easier.
Oh, big kill from Priestley. That's over towards tank fields, all the way deep to the defending tank. So now Priestley will have the luxury to take some more aggressive angles here right outside A. But Infinite trying to challenge inside the bomb. He did catch a look at the bomb carrier of Sauce. Infinite quickly trying to rotate over, and oh boy, he's actually in a position to where he may catch a player or two by surprise, including Fame's nade over the top. He tossed that from topside. Grandma's Bink wins the gunfight onto Priestley, and it's all kind of gone wrong here for St. Clair. Still a 2v2, but now it all rests onto Brandon again, and he will find Bink, turn this into a 1v1. Bomb still down, 40 seconds to play.
And even then, he's got to make the right rotation. He knows that he has the bomb somewhere around. He's just got to pick it up, go ahead and get a plant down, and that's the biggest issue that at hand. I mean, you know that Fame, he's going to go ahead and keep note of that, but instead, he's just playing it slow. He's saying, all right, he's going to be on his toes. He's going to be knowing that a defender is probably going to be around that bomb, when that's not the play at all. He's getting right in his head, playing far back, going for a post-plant scenario to put the pressure onto him. And I don't think Brandon's expecting this at all.
Well, it will allow him the luxury to plant for free. Fame, now knowing the time is coming through, will actually make a move. Has Brandon maybe heard something off of that nade that came out? Sure seemed to have, but he's guessed incorrectly. Fame has gone towards B. The bomb gets planted at A. Now the 1v1. And Brandon's going to go wrap all the way through tunnel. This is bold. This is super bold. You have to get here to check. Fame has hopped it.
What?
Can Brandon get here to check in time? No, Fame's going to bounce off. He feels a bit nervous about it. They see one another at range, and it's going to be the 1v1 to St. Clair. Whoa.
So many questionable calls. I'm sure that was just nothing but mental games. We said chess. These guys are playing 3D chess. They're playing on 4 dimensions right now. I mean, everybody making such weird calls saying, all right, I'm going to fake the plant. Now I'm going to fake the defuse. Go ahead. Why isn't anybody going to commit to a decision? I can't even commit to my words right now because I'm just so twisted up.
Look, I'll say this much. We've seen a lot of players in the CDL scrims and challengers. They're nervous to stick and hop onto a bomb because it's not a silent plant or silent defuse still. No. And that was maybe the gut check call from Brandon saying, I still got a round to play with. You know, if we do drop this, let me try to finesse it. Let's see if he does kind of toggle and jump off. The guess was correct. The bet did pay out. Unbelievable stuff. So St. Clair, we talked about them needing to be good at search and destroy. They've provided. But when we come back after the break, we've got to frame up how exactly will they win a respawn versus this Northwood team. That's what's on the table when we come back after this break. The continuation of Waterloo and Western you can find on twitch.tv/collegecod Bravo. But we go on here. 1-1 map count so far. St. Clair running through the search and destroy. Absolutely making Northwood look a bit silly. We'll take a look over the scoreboard really quickly to get a full recap of that before we start to frame up the Tuscan hardpoint. And how about Brandon? 11 of his 14 kills go non-traded, earning streaks in the process. He was a major problem for Northwood from start to finish.
Most definitely was. I mean, look at those non-traded kills. 11. I mean, that just in itself, being an SMG player, being able to play around the map, go ahead and have your influence everywhere when you need it necessary. I mean, I mentioned gut feeling before we went to break, and that's exactly what he did. We saw that tunnel play there in that last round, saying, look, sure, I may have had a fake plant there for a second. He may have had a fake defuse, but if you don't go ahead and stick your gut there, go ahead and stick on the defuse, that could have been a completely different story. But instead, I love the play of lapping around the mound, even though you go ahead and find yourself in an awkward situation, because as you said, weird plays. That was kind of awkward, but it ended up working.
And I just kind of want to mention this as we get a look at these scoreboards. How about the 4 first bloods from Priestley as well? Talking about that AR pressure that you had mentioned at the top of this matchup, that needs to be a factor, especially in search and destroy, and so it was. Here's the other thing I didn't even think about. How many grenade kills did St. Clair have that map as well? The utility game from St. Clair was phenomenal. The question, as we kind of re-wrap up map 2 and look forward to map 3, is how do you find that same kind of success going from a Bocage search and destroy into a Tuscan hardpoint?
Yeah, that's only fair, honestly, because, I mean, the way we saw St. Clair go ahead and win on an S&D, that's going to be a great little note for them to write down when it comes around to a 5th round. That is if we get there. And they got to win themselves a hardpoint to get there. So, I mean, as we go ahead and look at a Tuscan hardpoint, things are looking a lot different. I mean, you're only going to find those ARs really going out and fragging out when it comes around to that first point out there on the outside. And even then, I mean, you don't find yourself too many lineups. I mean, I would say P3 could be their best chance, or even more so P4. You go ahead and get stationed up in there. You get an AR towards the back line. Go ahead and have those lines of sight where you either A, get the intel to be working off of, or get yourself a perfect lineup that just covers the entirety of that site. And you can mow down somebody if they come in there for that support.
So the question here, if you were to kind of just, you know, do a spark notes over the Berlin hardpoint, Northwood was beating St. Clair on rotation pretty much every hill that we saw outside of maybe the first 3. There were some good contests there from St. Clair. Do you want to see St. Clair maybe chalking hardpoints earlier in favor of trying to win those rotations and actually getting a setup? Because the one thing we know for a fact here is St. Clair cannot be continuing to be the team that's breaking through this map if they want to have a chance at beating Northwood here.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, I don't think that's what they needed to do. I feel like it was just too much revving of the engine there at the start of the race, and then you just run out of gas halfway through the stretch. I mean, that's something that's a big problem in the CCL that I've seen over all of our matches over yesterday as well, is that the team that finds themselves a big advantage there in the start, they don't find a way to lap around to it. They think this game's going to carry off momentum. They're just feeling the tide. They're running along with it, just feeling the flow. But, I mean, once they finally get that lead robbed away from them, they figure out, yo, what happened? You got to think about that earlier, why you have the lead instead of just waiting for it to be robbed away from you.
Well, opening hardpoint comes through. St. Clair 2-for-1 in the exchange, but outside the hard point until finally they feel the confidence to move forward, and with the numbers, they clean up Northwood, and they will break for some significant time, but on the re-break, here comes Northwood with numbers of their own. Good nades from Chris Radial, able to help out. Fame making safe the U-Haul, at least for a time, as Gorilla tries to look for a double, but will be cut down short, and Northwood have re-broken the hard point on their second attempt.
And this is a great little setup for both sides already to go ahead and get some contention on the field, go ahead and make some score lines, not look too big into the differential off the get-go. But, I mean, even then, you only have 13 seconds left. I want to see a rotation already coming through, and even then we see St. Clair setting up for it. So they're already making those adjustments, already getting those frags, and it's going off to the side of Northwood. So this is great. This is a great setup for them. They can go ahead and start looking for spawns, get that setup they really need to go ahead and get themselves a lead.
Big 1v1 for Brandon. He does confirm the damage that was dealt onto Radial. So the spawns are good for St. Clair. Northwood looking to contest that very aggressively, mind you, from the front. Sanguine with their confidence at the moment as they try to push forward, but it's just being locked down. This is just good anchoring from Brandon. You really can't contest too much about it. He knows what his job is here. He's the last player up. He's got to keep it and make sure the spawn stays safe for his teammates to then eventually reinforce the hard point itself. And now here comes a pinch. Sauce from behind, able to find one, but still more Northwood members to find. And it looks like for the most part, St. Clair will not have the numbers to win the trades.
And that's a big problem here because St. Clair, we see that Brandon is that step-up player. He's really the one who's all over the map, being an absolute nuisance right now in these alleyways because as an SMG player, that's going to be your job. But, I mean, you've got to push aside eventually. You don't have players there that are winning frags on the site to hold the site. Sure, you get spawns, that's great, but when you're getting no time, you're just making the job a lot harder for Northwood, but it doesn't matter if they're still getting the job done. So if you're not setting up for this next site already, if you don't have the rotations here, P3 could be a lot more forgiving for them to go ahead and get these rotations out, get the spawns to really get themselves onto a site quickly.
And look how far forward Northwood are playing. I mean, Fame is just happy to sit under the hard point right now, but you've got your SMGs zoning off topside over through fire in the ruins. For a moment, you did have Infinite who was watching backside command center. And now as they start to read where the hit for St. Clair is coming from, Northwood seems to be pretty primed and ready for it. Brandon, not sure if anyone's on the actual fountain itself, but Ben is actually able to bait out shots from Fame. Chris Radial committing for the glide bomb, but Brandon for a double. That will break open at least the hard point for now. The pistol's good for the third, and St. Clair have forced their way in through arches.
Even then, there's no reinforcements there. We saw Brandon absolutely go off, but there was just nobody there to really follow through with them, to hold down that side, get the trades off with them, and even then, that's a huge choke off for St. Clair. You see them just dancing around the side, just praying to live out their lives. You got to bite back eventually. You got to keep that life alive. You got to give yourself a reason to be fighting and playing in this game still. And Infinite, already being on that lineup I said that ARs need to be playing into. Get in the back of the map, get the free spawns, and also give yourself a lot of intelligence towards the back of the map. If you don't have a break yet, it's looking like Northwood could get themselves a lot of time to be working with.
Well, it's just two members right now for St. Clair, but number 4 and Green Gorilla spawns up. Northwood may not expect this, but the kills are starting to turn up in favor of the Timberwolves, at least for a time. Bink eventually overwhelmed and pressured out St. Clair. Bit of a surprise spawn, ends up benefiting them as they did lock down this church nicely. Now the next hit for Northwood, all of it coming from the north side of the minimap. And it looks like Gorilla is largely ready for this, but does he have the nades available to maybe slow it down? So far the answer no, and with that, Northwood go 4 for 1 for a rebreak.
That's a great re-break for them and you'd be working off of. You saw the way they went ahead and breached that site. They found themselves on the outside of the map, going ahead and pressuring spawns a little bit, alluding to that, but not fully committing just yet. Knowing that somebody's going to be coming out for those frags, able to go ahead and lock down those spawns, and even then, you got to push the front of the church at that stage. You can't go ahead and try to refrag for that. Find whatever numbers of advantage you can, work as a unit, and then push yourself across the map. And even then, we already see St. Clair doing that, setting up for P5 overall, looking for that rotation, looking to find themselves on site, but Infinite has something to say about it.
Oh, Infinite has a lot to say about it. Sauce took the ego shell from the top ropes. Denied, and with Radial winning the final 1v1 up top, that now means Northwood can sneak their way in and actually line up maybe a handful through this topside archway. Kills are decent, but for the large majority of it, St. Clair still have an avenue largely to work with. I say that with a bit of hesitation because every single time they look that they're about to push forward, Northwood will zone them away. And as we have 30 seconds to fight for on the hill, it's just all about where will St. Clair come from, and it looks like Northwood have figured it out and dealt with it no problem.
I saw a great lineup from one of Concordia's players yesterday from Siri, who was an AR player, just sitting in the back of that lineup, just going ahead, find themselves on P5, looking at that window, crossing through it, and looking at that entire side, able to get an assist for every single player that comes through there. Even if his team is assisting or gets the kill, he does not care. He's finding himself a lot of time, and we just don't see something like that at St. Clair right now. And honestly, that's what they need. They need those AR lineups. They need Priestley to go ahead and get these setups because he's slaying out, but he's just not making it worth their time.
50-50 battle here on the front side of the first hard point as we exit the first rotation, 140-70. Fame got a little turned around there for a moment. Gorilla nearly caught out with the nade of his own, but he will be the last Saint to stay alive. Nicely off the regen, keeps the play open. Reinforcements now spawning up, looking to re-hit, but Fame has already retaken his position that he previously was occupying, and as the shots start to come through, Gorilla's able to find a kill. Problem is, they have not even come close to threatening the front of this hard point yet.
They most definitely have, and that's a big problem if you're sitting in the shoes of St. Clair right now, knowing you got to go ahead and get some breath of life and some breath of fresh air at least to get yourself into that second search and destroy, but we're just not seeing that fire right now. They're down 100. Things are really slipping out of their grasp. You look at the likes of Northwood, they are just slaying out, and they don't care where the spawns are going. They don't care what's really happening on the map. They know they can just hold that site, whatever it comes down to. And even then, Fame just doubling down on that. If you're St. Clair, sure, you want to fight for time, but you've got to be on this rotation. You've got to set up, and you've got to kill Bink because he's already setting up for the rest of his team.
It kind of feels like a copy-paste of Berlin. First set of rotations, there's a great first 3 hills, and then all of a sudden, St. Clair just kind of feels like they're behind the ball. And even right there, at a certain point, you got to say chalk and rotate. Just cut through church. Everyone's trying to hit from the front, and Bink is just happy to sit here and just spam out this automaton. Eventually dealt with, and fortunately for St. Clair, they've got a route to work with around the back, but there are still just block spawns. These aren't convincingly been won as of yet. And while this is all happening, this fight for the spawn, Northwood's streaking closer to 250 for free.
Yeah, I mean, that's all it comes down to. You saw St. Clair over-investing into one problem. Sure, Big is sitting there not really allowing you to do too much, but, I mean, you look at the rest of the team. They're already on the site. They're grabbing time. You haven't rotated anywhere else. Instead, you just think there's only one avenue to every single site. That's not the case. Your lack of your narrowness and your little tunnel vision right now that's working for you, it's not working at all in the big scheme of things. You are slipping this game out of your fingers. You're getting absolutely demolished in terms of score. Sure, you're fragging to some extent, but it's not enough to keep up with the likes of Northwood.
No, it's definitely not. And you kind of look back over the KDs really quickly for St. Clair. Look how many engagements they're trying to force. I mean, 15 and 24 in a game that sees them be 100-point clubbed again. At a certain point, we got to keep going back to just fundamental hardpoint. Set up, get together, hit something as a squad, or chalk the back 20 seconds of a hardpoint and focus the full force on a rotation to win spawns. You know, when you're playing up against the team that has the individual prowess of Northwood, you can't just figure you're going to go and do 1v1s and be able to win scrap time, or even just 1v1s trying to play for the rotation. You have to try to overwhelm and play maybe, I hate to say the word safe, but you have to play a little bit tactically smarter when it comes to your reserved nature of, let's make sure we do this, right? Confidently send numbers to make sure we win the spawns. Then we send confident numbers to make sure we win the hard point, rather than, I'm going to go try to hit a 1v1 timing when there's only 5 seconds left on the old hard point. It's just not worth it.
Yeah, and even for them, I mean, I'm sure they're going to have a lot of discussions to figure out what they could have done, but I mean, they don't want to have those discussions right now. They're going ahead, getting ready for another map. The biggest thing they really had to take away from that going into another hard point is saying, we just got to do things differently. I mean, honestly, that's all it dwindles down to. Think of the small scale. Go ahead, think of that bigger picture and say, yo, what can we do differently? And I think it all comes down to the map size. Tuscan was not really playing into their lifestyle. We saw them really excel in some long-range combats. We saw them, especially in S&D, where you can slow the game down. You don't have too much to really deal with. Everything is a one-shot, one-and-done. But, I mean, hardpoint, that's not the case. We see them playing a little bit too safe, a little bit too slow, going right back to the ideology that won them is search and destroy, but that's not going to work for hardpoint. You're going to see Northwood doing that aggression they did when it came around to that round 1 on S&D and carrying that over into this game, saying that's what worked for us. So we're going to do it again because there's 3 hardpoints, 2 S&Ds. We take away this series. So we're going to have to see St. Clair step it up, find themselves getting a bigger picture of the map, finding better rotations, and even if they sacrifice some time, go ahead and take a different avenue of the map to the site. You don't have to push all 4 down. We saw the alleyway, 3 players stacked where you can got it collat there even. We didn't see it, but I mean, just the theoreticals just thrown up into the air, that's a big problem.
Indeed the case. Take a look back onto the scoreboard, though, really quickly to get a full recap on what exactly had unfolded. And maybe some of the statistics can give us an instance of why things were going the way it was. And how about Radial again? 22 non-traded kills. You've also got the objective kills that are very heavily stacked in favor of Northwood. Kills per hill. I mean, 4.14 kills per hill for Chris. That's... yeah. He's just running through it, no problem. And on the other side, it's just, you know... Yeah, there's really not a lot you can look at and say, oh, this is good. I mean, you had Sauce go 11 and 19. You never love to see that. And still look at Brandon at 15 and 24. That is a lot of engagements compared to the rest of his team. And at a certain point, you just got to slow down and wait for help, because you cannot allow Chris Radial to get 51 engagements and win 30 of them.
I mean, even then, looking at Fame, 17-13, sitting on the site for two minutes.
Yeah.
That's a problem. I mean, you look at Sauce, 55 seconds. That's your top player, not even finding a minute at a time, and it's not even evenly allocated. I mean, when every single member, the second most whenever it came around to the other side, on the other side for Northwood, was 1:43. You're not getting any contestation time. That's another big problem. I mean, not saying that, okay, well, we can get to the fight, we can go ahead and get some time on the board. If you can't even do that, it comes right back around to what we just said. You're just getting spawned out. You're getting slayed before you even get to the side. You got to choose a different way to approach the game and approach each site, because, I mean, they're just going to set up for it. You're going to keep on funneling. You're going to keep on running to that same spot over and over and over again. And they're going to read that and say, look, you're just playing dumb at this point. And that's a problem. We say you got to work smarter, not harder, because your brain's not really functioning as it's supposed to. I think you're just on a little bit of a high after winning that S&D.
And now we look at Bacage hardpoint, where I think for St. Clair you have to work smarter and harder, just due to the nature that Bacage brings. And hey, here's the thing. Your ability to rotate through this map is a direct byproduct of your ability to get kills. So even finding trades may not be enough. This is a map and a venue and location where you've got to step up and convincingly win the kill feed in the back 20 seconds of a hard point, whether that be for scrap or trying to focus on a rotation to any of our key hills that we start to see. So it's a tall ask here. But St. Clair, the question will be, can they get to playoff form in week 1 and potentially contest this Northwood team? Not a solid start, 3 for 1, and Fame's already looking to make some pressure happen inside Granny's.
What St. Clair needs to do here is open up the map a lot more. Any wall they see, break it. Any window you see, break it. If you see some wood on the floor, break it. I don't care what it is. You just got to make sure that every single lineup can be manipulated as much as possible. Open up this map, give yourself a lot more leeway, because Northwood, when it comes around to a lot of these sites, which are in the middle of the map and these little nitty-gritty hallways, they're going to win those fights 9 times out of 10. And that's not a good ratio for you if you're trying to get back into this game.
No, not at all. Solid start here for the first hard point. Sauce good for 1. But that'll be it. Spawn's good for St. Clair as you look towards the second hard point. But look at the re-wrap here from Northwood. You've got Infinite on your screen already trying to block him. That was just completely missed. No one was even looking over to the south side of the map for St. Clair. Now they're trying to scramble to help reinforce this hard point. And fortunately enough, there are some good kills inside the barn. And Sauce holds a corner against Infinite. So corrections have been made. And now you have a chance to start soaking up some time, although Northwood is still threatening from the backside spawns.
Even then, you see St. Clair starting to slay out a little bit, give themselves a little bit more breathing room, and that's exactly what you need. But only problem is, once again, look at it. Sauce, he's the only one on site. That's a problem. You need more teammates to follow through. You got to go ahead and start looking for those spawns. Even if nobody's on the site, the lead isn't that massive yet. You're still in the early stages of the game. You need to go ahead and look at the bigger picture, find yourself a setup for these next couple sites, get yourself an advantage on a side of the map, a whole half of the map at that. And we're just not seeing that yet. And even then, Northwood, in the meantime, they're going ahead and making their lead that much bigger.
Gorilla does get around the backside. That's good for a double for him. One more on the hard point. He wants Bink, but he gets denied. Scrap time going the way of the Timberwolves of Northwood. Now over to 3. Fame already on rotation. There was nobody zoning this hard point for St. Clair. They were just bunkered up inside, and you cannot allow just blind hits to come through for free for Northwood. They're going to be able to slay you out in these positions, and we're starting to see exactly why. Although, the recovery, well found for the Saints. They find 3 straight dead, and that'll be enough to start accruing some time here on the third.
It's a great little way for them to go ahead and get on the map. Sure, a little bit more advantage to be working with, a little bit more time on the board, but I mean, that slips out of your fingers pretty quickly. When Brandon's taking his old sweet time upstairs, he's up at Granny's attic, and it's not going to be enough work for the rest of his team. Knowing he's not getting those trades, he's an SMG player looking at a long range of sight. That's not really where you excel. You got to know where you're deserved and where you need to be, and that's really on the site with the rest of your team. Getting these trades, knowing you're that Slayer he can really be relied on, and so far, only seen him at 3 and 6. I'm a little disappointed to say the least.
Well, opportunities definitely underway here for St. Clair as they try to get aggressive around the hard point. Allows Sauce a chance to kind of lock down a corner and turn that into a double for the scrap time. So the game right back into marginal terms here for St. Clair as they're only down about 14 points. But now we go over to Barn. Multiple points of ingress. The question is, can you clear the space around? And so far, Priestley will give us exactly what we need to see if you're a St. Clair fan. First 2 kills go his way. The pinch also picked up. Yeah, Northwood still spawning close, but the kills are starting to amount here for St. Clair as they find a way to get in and at least contest, but Fame from the side door for 2. Needs to be responded to and is as Sauce finds a double of his own. Although the influence of the spawns will mean Northwood can get back in for time.
Yeah, these are some great doubles coming out from St. Clair. Time in, time out. We've seen a lot of them. Just making them relevant in this game. Just not giving them a tie game or a leading game, and that's a big problem. They got to go ahead and set up for this next site. It's 25 seconds. Sure, you need to get at least one player to contest, or at least go ahead and give a little bit of leeway on that last site. But, I mean, look at how the game's panning out. I mean, it's not too big of a differential. Things are still looking good. Nobody's hit 100 yet. You can just go ahead, slow down, think for a second while you have this one player, Brandon, who's on site, able to go ahead and create some more contention, make the game look a lot more doable.
Now again, Brandon had a start like this in our last map. Would love to see him try to make some coordinated efforts with his teammates to make sure that they can stay at least competitive as we rotate over to one of the more key hard points here in Bacage. 3 straight kills for Northwood is good news. Also, the play for the backside spawns denied by Northwood as St. Clair now have to kind of regroup and try to hit something together and hopefully not down the same line of sight as where a lot of these headies are. Even trades thus far. Radio looking to get aggressive to zone off the next hit, and he will at least get some information on where St. Clair's coming from.
I mean, that's a great way to go ahead and get some intel on the field. Go ahead and give yourself a little bit more to be working with, especially for the rest of your squad, but you got to make those calls. Make sure they're actually heard and registering on the ears of the rest of your team. And right now, St. Clair playing things slow and steady, going ahead and separating out across the map, and Priestley having a great kill right there towards the edge of the map. But you're getting all this influence, but you still have a lot of players playing back. I mean, right there, Gorilla in the middle, Priestley and Brandon on the side. You have nobody really there on site. Sure, you're grabbing some great kills, but if you kill Northwood, who's overextending, if they still had the spawns, they're just going to reset and make their job that much easier, saying, all right, well, he's over there. I'm just going to come right back to site and wait for him to come to him.
And look at the setup right now for Northwood. Look how aggressive they're getting on both sides of the map, on the north and the south. Bink is trying to take away the field angle. You saw Fame hit for scrap time. He's zoned off the river. And now the SMGs inside. Grannies are going to be able to get to work. Infinite. 3 in a row, 18 and 11. 4th around the corner, denied. Pistol was out, but Priestley still gets traded as Northwood continue to stand on top of what normally is a very scrappy courtyard hardpoint. 155-71 the current tally. And at a certain point for St. Clair, you need to start getting some significant time, not just here in the first, but you need to lock down a setup going eventually into 2 for the next 25 seconds.
I like what old Priestley's trying to go for there, even though he doesn't find a long enough time to survive and really execute. He needs to go ahead and find themselves on that P4, where you have that old house right there in between 1 and 2. You get an easy cutoff. You get a really good high ground on top of that P1 and P2. You just have your 2 players up there in the top. Have 2 players down there in the bottom. Get everybody to be able to check each other. Create that potential, because right now, we're just seeing one-for-ones, and we're just seeing slays coming out, and no real answers coming out. I mean, even right there, Fame with a double just really going off, and he's even unanswered at that.
And we still have another stat line here where you've got 2 players that are threatening on or maybe even above double positive for Northwood. Just goes to show the trade game is just not quite there for St. Clair. 171-82. Streak called in. Doesn't confirm any kills. Fame just running rampant in the middle of the map. Uses that information to cut through grannies, and this is, again, just puts a lot of pressure on St. Clair, who need to break, by the way. They still need to fight for this 30 seconds. They just don't have an angle, because Fame is already so far forward. He can get a read. Okay, now he makes the call out. 2 are mid-map, so now Infinite knows he's got to play his life, make life as difficult as possible for St. Clair, and here you go. Now suddenly you get a little bit of overwhelming pressure from the Saints. The problem is the recovery is so quick because Northwood's still spawning in.
Even then, the recovery is so quick, but also on top of that, you've sat there and taken so long to take this execution, make this move around the map, that you find yourself finally getting some momentum on a site, but there's only 18 seconds left. That's some great work that you've done for some scrap time. So you need to go ahead and figure out really what you're working for in just the bigger scheme of things. And it's just not enough right now. We see everybody playing a little bit slow. Sauce able to go ahead and grab one, so looking great for him. But Brandon, there on the outside, grabbing a glide bomb. This is going to be massive, and you have to make the most of that. Instead, we see Sauce just rushing right in, saying, look, all that work you just put in there, I pray you can get the trade on site, because I'm just going to run into a 1v2.
Yeah. Break does come through for St. Clair, as for the first time in their hard points, they're looking to break out of the 100-point club. Not a confirmed play yet, as it's a 4-man feed once again for Northwood. 22 seconds to fight for here on 3rd, and you can already see over the minimap the heat wave of what will be Northwood over across the barnyard will mean very difficult tidings here for St. Clair. And even with the favorite spawns, they haven't even barely been in the contest some of the scrap time yet. This is all panning out very poorly for the Saints. as you've got 25-16 now for Infinite, 23-16 for Bink. I mean, look across the scoreboard. There's nothing but positivity to be shown for Northwood at the moment.
Yeah, and at this stage of the game, when you find yourself sitting at 15 seconds closing out the game overall, you don't even need to look at the mini-map or the scoreboard at the top. Just look at that kill feed, man. It's white and green, left to right, and it's just a big problem. St. Clair, I mean, they're going to have to play pitch perfect, and they've already waited a little bit too late. And even then, the way they performed, I don't think they were able to really pull all those gears out.
A tough first matchup, though.
Yeah,
as critical as we may seem, let's be honest, it's the first game of your CCL season. You're going up against a team that likely will be in the top 3 all year long. So it's a tall ask, but I think the biggest thing here, Mick, is that we still are seeing a lot of the vulnerabilities and some of the moments and kind of different circumstances that St. Clair needs to look to improve upon as they go through their division here in the first stage.
Yeah, and even then, some vulnerabilities for the likes of Northwood. I mean, their S&D was not flawless, so that's a perfect way for teams to get a little bit of hope, a glimpse of light here to say, look, these guys, sure, they're top dogs right now. They're expected to be top 3 in their division and probably a top 5 or 10 team when it comes around to the CCL all season. But, I mean, anybody's potential to go ahead and shut that down. Anybody's welcome to go ahead and hand these guys their first loss because we know it's going to come eventually. But, I mean, all it really dwindles down to is who's going to do that and who's going to make those adjustments quicker, who's going to watch this vibe back and really invest themselves into how they play the game. Because you got to see that slaying power, sure, that's insane and all, but, I mean, slaying power is extremely reliant on S&D. And, I mean, when you see that the game slows down, you got to figure out how to bring that pace of the game over to hardpoint. I know it's an extremely hard thing to do, but whoever wants to put in the work to do that, they're going to be vastly rewarded for it.
Yeah, I mean, as we take a look back over the map set again here really quickly to give us the full recap of how this series went, you know, I think you've got a situation where every single hardpoint scoreboard that we've seen, we've had a member for Northwood be near double positive, and around 3K plus damage is a guarantee in each of the hard points that we've had. And when you load into a search and destroy, you expect that the same success will be there when you're playing up against players that you don't see in challengers on a regular basis, right? Because for these 4 guys, you know, top 64 is pretty much an expectation through the challengers. But then, you know, I think they all have individual potential to find themselves on rosters that can get to Sunday, get to day 2, top 8, definitely. And you're going up against Gorilla, Priestley, Sauce, and Brandon. I think mentally you load into this matchup and you expect we can just run into this, no problem, dominate. And that over kind of assumption is one that will definitely come to bite them in the butt because, you know, just being good individually eventually will kind of catch up against you, especially in modes like Search and Destroy.
Yeah, and I'm expecting a lot of these players to go and step it up over this next week and really hit the sticks. I mean, especially Gorilla. When you look at the way he plays hardpoint, I want to say it's a little loose, a little too loose. Sure, it's great to wander yourself off the map, sitting with 6 seconds on the hill, but you didn't get the trade-off there around the map. I mean, you're an SMG player. You're not really getting where you need to be. You're not really playing out your life as safely as you should, and that's what you said before even going into this hardpoint. You got to play a little bit more safe. But when you're going 17 and 30, you're getting objective kills, and you're only getting 3 of those. I mean, you're not really playing into your team all that much. You're just playing your own game. You're saying, look, this is TDM. No, it's not. I mean, when you have that kind of ideology, it's really going to start to sting. Your teammates are going to ask you after the game's over and saying, what were you doing that entire time? I mean, we were fighting for the site. We all had at least 20 seconds. And meanwhile, you were making no kinds of trade-offs to really help us.
It's difficult, right? Because on a lot of the speed and pace that Vanguard demands, at a certain time, someone does have to kind of go rogue. And I hate to even use that phrase because the value of somebody getting away from the objective and getting a read on where's the next hit coming from, can I maybe contest an early rotation to new? Yeah. Those things are very valuable because you don't want to be too statuesque, I think. But I do naturally agree with you. Against a team like Northwood, you have to be playing for trades. ABTs is what we called it all the time during like the Black Ops 4 year. Like always be trading. If you find yourself in 1v multiples time and time again against the caliber of opponent like you've got in Northwood and what you may assume that you're going to run into for other groups that you have to still play up against, by the way. I mean, you still got a couple of really solid teams in this division, including Grand Valley and Davenport. You can't just run in and expect that fundamental gameplay is going to be enough to get you past those teams. On the other front, for Northwood, I think that's a wake-up call in a way. I mean, the hard point, you expect them to beat teams because life after life, they will run the day, I think, on most of the teams that are in this Northeastern division. But in Search and Destroy, when you've got the one life to live, you better be setting something up because some of these teams will playbook against you, no problem.
Yeah, and I think it all comes down to them just really overly being prepared for these hard points. I mean, you see the way they move as a group. They play very collectively. They're not really too concerned about spawns. And even sometimes when someone does go out of their way, they make it worthwhile. Because as I said, I mean, when it comes around to Gorilla, I'm not going to sing on this guy all day. But I want to say that being that rogue player, I mean, that's essential, as you said. It's actually really important. You need a player like that. They have to go ahead, know when to rotate to one spawn to the next, not really worry about the objective, but still have eyes on it just in case your team needs that help. And that's a really, really hard role to fulfill. I mean, that is extremely important. There's so many crucial values that come out of it, and it's extremely hard to fill those shoes. And when you go ahead and see how much you really just didn't hand your team in that matchup, you got to see that, all right, well, even if I over-prepared, that's better than under-preparing for this next week, for these next couple weeks. I'm sure with the way this division is lining up, they're going to see each other again.
Oh, you would have to feel so, maybe potentially even in playoffs. But that definitely gets us through our first series. And it's not it, because we still got 2 more to come, and both of them are going to be really solid games, especially the one that's coming up next. Penn State, Concord. It's a little bit of a grudge match from last year as both teams were flawless, with the only exception for Penn State being the fact that they lost to this Concord team during the regular season. Can they maybe have found corrections with the new roster this year? We'll find out as we frame things up for our second series right after this.